I'm Chelsea Ratcliff. I'm excited to share with you some research I've done with my colleagues that seeks to better understand how public audiences view the nature of scientific preprints and the extent to which the average person or non-expert sees this research as unvetted and preliminary. A preprint is a scientific research paper that hasn't yet been published in a scholarly journal, and scientists use preprints to make their findings available right away prior to or concurrent with journal submission. Yet scientific papers can change in important ways during peer review. Sometimes uncertainty is reduced through this process. Other times uncertainty is increased when authors are pushed to soften scientific claims and acknowledge limitations and unknowns. And some preprints are deemed to have unsound science and never get published at all. Given this, we should use some caution when interpreting preprint evidence. During the COVID-19 pandemic, media reporting on preprint research increased dramatically when a need for rapid information led to an explosion of scientists posting their research to preprint servers and journalists disseminating these findings to broader audiences. Journalists were encouraged to mention the preprint status of the research in their news reporting and to not present the scientific findings as certain or conclusive, but we don't really know how public audiences interpret information framed in this way. Does the average person understand the difference between a preprint and an article published in a scientific journal? Do they see preprint status as an indicator of preliminary evidence? We realized these questions hadn't received a lot of attention, but are becoming increasingly relevant as reporting on preprints becomes a new norm. We conducted a survey experiment in which we showed people different versions of a news article about preprint COVID-19 vaccine research to get a sense of how people would respond to information about the preprint status of the research, as well as hedging of scientific conclusions, so presenting them as tentative as opposed to certain. We collected data from about 400 participants around the United States with varying levels of education, and we conducted this study in April of 2021, just as the vaccines were becoming widely available to the US public. In addition to showing participants one of these versions of the news article, which either included or excluded mention of the preprint status and either included or excluded hedging of study claims, we also asked participants to describe in their own words how they understand the concept of a preprint when they see that term in a science news story. A number of findings emerged that indicated that a majority of people don't understand the concept of a scientific preprint and may also not understand that uncertainty is inherent to the nature of science more generally. I'll talk about three main findings. First, people who read the hedged conclusions reacted quite unfavorably to the news article. They reported less trust in the scientists, less trust in the news article, and lower intention to receive the vaccine. But mentioning preprint status had no effect on people's attitudes toward the vaccine or the scientists or the news article. And while that would seem to be a good thing, participants also didn't perceive the science as uncertain. It seemed that they didn't really have a grasp of the concept of a preprint, despite the brief explanation that was included within the news article. The open-ended responses confirmed this, with only 1 in 4 participants giving an accurate definition of preprint. About 10% viewed the term to mean that the science hadn't yet undergone peer review or become part of the scientific record, and about 15% viewed the term to be an indicator of preliminary science. So in total, only about 25% had some realistic sense of the meaning of the term. These findings suggest that the mention of preprint status is likely to go unnoticed by a majority of news consumers. We don't think this means that preprint status of research shouldn't be conveyed, but it does mean that there may be a need for additional contextual information to give people a sense of the preliminary or unvetted nature of preprint research. At the same time, the negative reactions to hedging suggested that people may have been overly sensitive to this uncertainty, which was really actually quite minor and shouldn't have shaken people's confidence in the vaccine in the way it seemed to in this study. Maybe mentioning in news stories that some uncertainty is a normal part of science, which is sometimes called a normalizing frame, could help general audiences to realistically interpret the uncertainty and not be surprised or dismayed by it.